to study other religions to understand the world around us. In my class, we're going to talk about Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, and other little things along the way. So we're going to talk about a lot of different faiths in this class, and this is just the first of many that we're going to spend some time with. All right, so the Hebrews, who were they? Well, we've been studying the land of Canaan. We've been talking about a group of Canaanites called the Phoenicians, and now we're ready to talk about the most famous group to be in there, the Israelites. Now, their civilization, the Hebrew civilization, really it's going to be from around 1800 to 70 AD. We have 70 AD being our end because that is when the temple will be destroyed by the Romans. So there's going to be a beautiful temple in Jerusalem that the Romans are going to destroy. And that's when we mark the end of our civilization, because then we have the diaspora. Boy, that looks delicious, Mariah. Now, the Hebrews are going to be famous for their religion of Judaism, and the founder of that religion is going to be a man named Abraham. This is going to be particularly important because Judaism was going to be the first monotheistic religion, which I mentioned, and the faiths of Christianity and Islam are actually going to draw a lot and see themselves as continuations of this faith. So we're going to see, for example, the Torah is going to be the Hebrew Bible, essentially, and many Christians know that as the Old Testament, which is right before the New Testament. So Christians, with their holy book, have the Jewish holy book in there. Just a reminder, monotheism is the belief in one God. Like I said, their sacred text is called the Torah. You have to absolutely know the term monotheistic, and you also have to absolutely know that their sacred text is the Torah. So make sure to underline, highlight, tattoo that to your brain noggins, my cherubs. Now, Torah, what it literally means is God's teaching. And if anyone is familiar here with the Old Testament or the Torah, you'll see that there are many teachings from God in there. Now, this is going to be something that's going to be actually very unique to the Hebrews. So our primary sources, our information about the Hebrews comes from the religious texts. And this is going to be very different from other civilizations we've studied. You know, when we're studying the Egyptians, we didn't get all of our history from their religious texts. We got their history from hieroglyphics written down. We got their history from the ruins and things that we found, and also from the what other people wrote about them. For Hebrews, first off, the Torah wasn't written down the same time it was created. The Torah was orally passed down for generations and generations and generations, meaning Avery went and learned the Torah from his father, memorized it, and then passed it down to his son Avery II, who then will pass that down to Avery III, and Avery IV, and Avery V. You know, so it was orally passed down, and then only later was this written. So what happened with this is a lot of people question the authenticity of some of this history, but we're finding now that archaeology is often going and confirming many of the things that we have in the Torah. So people are like, oh, well, I guess we can use this as a historical document that it is. So not only is the Torah a religious text, it's our primary source for a lot of the history about our Israelites. Any questions or comments at this point, or shall I persevere?
No, sir.
Okay. Moving on. And this, by the way, is a picture of the Torah. Typically, it's really cool how it is on the scroll. And you unwind it through here. Another cool thing about this is you read from right to left. So this is going to be a quick overview of some of the high points we're going to talk about this. You don't have to write these things down because we're going to talk about all of these things in greater detail later on. Mariah's like, man, I haven't been writing anything down. What do you mean writing stuff down? Madeline Kate's here like stretching, doing her gym routine. Now, Abraham is going to be the founder of the Hebrews. He is going to be the founder of Judaism. He was not born Abraham. He was actually born Abram. And as it goes, he was actually from the city of Ur in Mesopotamia. So we talked about Ur way back in the beginning of the year. And with the city of Ur, Abram was said to have heard a voice. So heard God's voice. And then it said, go to Canaan. And, typically when I hear voices, not that I hear voices, I'm kidding. I go, oh man, I have gone cray-cray. But Abram listens to this voice, packs up his family, packs up his flocks, his sheep, and moves to Canaan, where he then herds his sheep, his goats, and all of those animals. Like I said, we're going to talk more about Abraham tomorrow, actually. Now, we know that around 1800, we're going to see his descendants, the Hebrews, going down to Egypt, particularly the land of Goshen, which we know is the Nile River Delta. There, which corresponds with the story of Joseph, where Joseph went and had his brothers and their families all moved down to Egypt because of the great famine. We go and see that we're going to have the Hebrews living there. Since, of course, the Hebrews were in the best land that there was, and it was so super fertile, so awesome for them to grow stuff, they kept on having more and more and more of them, lots and lots of kids, because when you have lots of food, populations grow. And there, we know that the Egyptians are eventually going to enslave the Hebrews. There's this myth that the Hebrews helped build the pyramids, but if we see if they came around 1800, the Great Pyramid of Giza and other pyramids, literally have been, 600 to 800 years old at that point, so definitely not. But we also know somewhere, and the thing is, we don't have firm dates on these things, unfortunately, and some scholars will dispute these dates, but this is typically what historians are going for nowadays. Between 1250 and 1200, we have a man named Moses leading the Hebrews out of Egypt in an event called the Exodus. This is, of course, the story with the plagues and the party of the Red Sea. We'll get to all of this when we talk about Moses. And like I said, so the history is tied to the religious texts, and it's going to be up to you if you decide to believe the miracles or things, but we will talk about the stories as they are presented with our one source. Now, after the Exodus, we have a wandering in the desert for 40 years and eventually make it back to Canaan. And roughly 200 years after that, we believe we have a man named David who will wind up becoming king and uniting the tribes of Israel and Judah. Many of you probably heard of David from the David and Goliath story, where you have a young boy defeating a giant warrior. So, like I said, we're going to talk about all of these things in depth later on. This is a quick overview of some of the highlights we will discuss with our lesson on lessons on the Hebrews. Now, this is where we get into our meat and potatoes for today's lessons, where we talk about some beliefs of Judaism, and these are definitely going to be parts where I want you following along and making sure to jot your note Arunis down. You got that, Alicia? Okay. So, Judaism teaches that there is one God, and he is all-powerful and all-knowing. So, the way we often say that is omnipotent and omniscient. Omnipotent, omniscient. So, all-powerful, all-knowing. And the Jews believe it's their duty to honor and obey this all-powerful, all-knowing God, which would seem quite daunting and frightening. However, that this God is a God that cares and loves, and the Hebrews can go to him in prayer. So one of the key components of Judaism is this idea that people are able to pray and speak to God, which is actually going to be quite revelatory, quite new for many faiths at this time, because many of those polytheistic faiths, it required a priest to be able to pray. And we don't necessarily have that with Judaism, which will have priests, but it's going to be a little bit different than our Mesopotamian and Egyptian gods. You didn't have Mesopotamians going speaking to God, but in Judaism, you can. Now, I believe Marius stated that there is an emphasis on law. And following God's law is very important in Judaism. she remembered the foundation of these laws, the most important set that we have, which is going to be the Ten Commandments, which some of you are probably familiar with, even if that name doesn't ring a bell. Things like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, honor thy mother and father, have no other gods before me. So, don't covet your neighbor's stuff. But there are going to be many, many laws. In my current reading, I'm going through the book of Leviticus, and let me tell you, there are a couple hundred extra laws mentioned in that book right there. So there are going to be many, many, many laws. But really, the only ones we're going to ask you to know about are the Ten Commandments, and you're not even going to need to know the specific commandments. I'm not going to say, what about this whole thing about boiling a goat in its mother's milk? We're not going to talk about that. Well, we will a little bit when we get to kosher laws. Now, another key difference between the Hebrews and other groups at this time, besides being monotheistic, besides the idea that they could speak to their God, is this idea is the Hebrews didn't view their leaders as gods or having to be deified. When we talked about our Egyptians, they were gods. We had our priest kings in Mesopotamia. We see that the Hebrews just saw them as regular people because they believed in only one God. Oh my goodness, I'm so forgetful. What is that term called again when we believe in only one God? You remember that term, Alicia? Danielle does. This is good. I think Danielle said it earlier. Madeline Kate does. This is good. I don't think Madeline Kate has answered yet today. So, MK.
Polytheism?
Polytheism is close, but not what we're looking for. Polytheism is the belief in more than one God. Divine, what is one God?
Monotheism.
Monotheism. So close. You had the end, just not the root. So mono for one. All right. Now, here is another big thing that's going to be very important for Judaism. They thought all people were equal in God's sight. So when we studied our Egyptians or our Mesopotamians, they had their social pyramids, which we had some people being considered better than others, higher up. In Judaism, everybody is considered equal. Now, once again, going with the laws, knowing this law was important, and the people that taught these laws are a group of people called rabbis. They are the Jewish teachers. This is like the equivalent of a priest or a pastor, which some of you might be familiar with. So a rabbi is a Jewish teacher. And that, my cherubs, is our notes for today. So please make sure that you've got everything that you need to get. Your homework today is going to be going to your Monday 11:30 folder, which is going to be Chapter 6.1, Part 2, where you're going to have 4 questions to work on for that, which, of course, we'll go over mañana. So do we have any questions about any of this? I'm stopping the recording right now.